What is up, guys? Andy and Jesse here from Biohazard Declassified. I trust you are all doing well. Today, we got a very, very special guest. Today, we have got the YouTube content creator Dreamcast, guys. Say hello, Max. How you doing?
Hey, good to be here. A huge fan of Resident Evil. Been reading the site forever. Very happy to be here. I think this is my first time ever being live on a Facebook stream as well. So all new frontiers to me today.
Indeed, the most ambitious crossover since the Avengers, of course.
Yes, of course. This is the Avengers of horror, some would say.
There you go.
So yeah, we're just going to be we're going to be here. We're going to be shooting the shit. We're going to be talking all about the Dreamcast guy, talking about all upcoming projects, what you've been working on, but most importantly, where did you originally start from? Humble beginnings, I imagine.
Like gaming wise, or horror wise, or just anything.
Just in terms of the Dreamcast guy channel.
So the Dreamcast guy channel, I created it. Oh gosh, I created it like 10 or 11 years ago, and I kind of tinkered around with some like really cringy satirical reviews, very angry video game nerd style ripoff of like, here's a clip of gameplay, here's a joke. And I did 2 or 3 of those, and then I kind of put it down for about 6 or 7 years, and then I picked it up again in like 2012, 2013. I was working at a bookstore, and I randomly had this thing where I was like, I want to make YouTube videos. Since I worked at the bookstore, I had infinite access to knowledge. They allowed you to check out any book you wanted. So I started checking out stuff to teach myself editing, learning about microphones and cameras and green screen, the way I could Photoshop thumbnails. And I just kind of figured it out. And so I made about 100 really bad videos, and then some that sucked a little bit less, and it slowly grew.
Yeah, so it's about the destination, not the journey, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, how would you describe your kind of niche? Would be a rude term to use, but how would you describe your content to others? And I've said this to others, if me and you was in an elevator and you had to tell me what Dreamcast Guy was about,
I would say I'm a non-professional game reviewer, and I mean that in a positive sense, in that I've never gone to a single day of college. I have no training. I am nobody. But I think that's what people like about it, is that I'm just a gamer. I have thousands and thousands of games. I collect books on game development and art books and stuff. So I'm a guy that I am not going to be some giant professional employee at IGN or GameSpot. I'm kind of your alternative opinion, and nothing against major gaming websites. I just think that sometimes people like to see the random guy making videos in his spare bedroom. So I dig it. It's definitely fun. I like that I have all the creative freedom as well. I get to pick my projects, the games I want to beat. I can. If something sucks, I can just throw it away and not care. It's definitely a lot of freedom.
And that's the point, actually. So again, because you're a verified YouTube content creator, do you get special pickings? But as you said, you've got complete creative control over your content. Have any studios been in touch and offered you content, games and stuff like that to review? And have you ever felt like you had to give a good review, or have you always kind of had that sort of, right, you're going to get the game to me, this, I'm black and white, this is how it's going to be?
It's always been something. I actually like this a lot. 99% of game studios, they don't care if you give it a good score or a bad score. They just want an honest score. And so since they see that my content is it's straight up my opinion, it's unbiased, it's just, here's the game and here's what works. Every game studio I've worked with has been really cool. A lot of times they'll give me the game super early, sometimes 2 weeks. The craziest one time, because I'm a big Yakuza fan, I had Yakuza 6 2 months before release. Sega was like, the game's done. It's really big. Do you just want it right now? And I'm like, yes, I absolutely want it right now. So it's definitely a place of privilege, but I like that I can just like crank out these videos at my own scheduling. I like to give myself my own deadlines and stuff, but these game studios, a lot of times they trust me a lot. Like they're fine of like, even if I critique the hell out of it, a lot of times these studios, they're like, okay, well, still 100,000 people saw it, so it was worth giving him a $60 game because, that's going to sell a couple more games,
And any favorite studios? And again, I don't want to crucify you and so you don't get any future opportunities. But do you have any like really cool studios you like to work with who always give you a stream of content to work with, or is it just random?
I don't, not on the like business side, but one of my favorite things is, since I've been doing this for so many years, a lot of game developers know who I am. And I think a lot of us forget, when you beat a game and you see those like hundreds of names in the credits, those are individual people. Those are like artists and musicians and passionate people that are all trying to make this big art. So a lot of times when I go to these like gaming conferences or big conventions and stuff, I'll get stopped in the hall. And like one recently is when I was at QuakeCon playing Doom Eternal last year, this guy, like, I'm standing in line for something and this guy walked over and he was like, "Hey buddy, I'm actually one of the main dudes over on Doom Eternal. Like, did you play the demo yet?" And they pulled me out of line and let me play some Doom Eternal, just like played for as long as I wanted. And it's like obviously like an alpha demo version thing of it, but they just were like, "Okay, so honestly, did the jumping feel good and stuff?" So that's my favorite thing, is more than just like which people give me games. It's the interesting thing of like, I finally get to see the faces behind the games, which is so cool to me.
Yeah. And I suppose, say if there was a, not a bad game, that'd be a bad way of phrasing it, but say a game that you didn't particularly like, if you had the chance to meet the developers and kind of really understand, because it might just be you're not understanding the message of their game, like with other media, like movies, music, that sort of thing. So I suppose you really start to appreciate the art form behind it, if you actually do meet the developers.
It is, and you also see the mistakes a little bit more. Like a lot of times the biggest problem is that it's, imagine if you're trying to drive a school bus, but everybody in the school bus can vote which way you're going to turn the car. So you're the game director, but you have all these kids in the back that are saying, turn right again, turn right again. So sometimes the best idea with good execution and enough budget still completely sucks, just because like confusion or crossed wires. So sometimes it's nice to play a really bad game, and then years later I'll get to actually sit down and like have lunch with one of the developers, and they're like, "Oh, we had this totally different leveling system, and then at the last minute they made us cut it out." Like one of the like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, I had sources tell me on the record that basically they were making that game, everything was great, and towards the end, Square Enix pulled them into an office and said, "It needs microtransactions. I don't care how you get it in there, it needs to have microtransactions." And so at the last minute, they're like, "Okay, then I guess we need to alter the whole leveling system so you can buy boosters." And that stuff just happens. And it's like, this guy's paying my rent. I have to do what he says. Even if my artistic ideas don't like it, I got a freaking mortgage, So I think a lot of times we kind of forget that, like, sometimes the dumpster fires we play, it's not just one guy screwing it up. It's not one dude being lazy. A lot of times it's this huge, multifaceted hydra of problems. So.
No, agreed. And you can definitely tell that in, media such as Battlefront, like a lot of love was poured into it, but you can tell when there's involvement from other parties, the suits, it then just becomes out of control. And that's actually a valid point. You've and looking at your channel, I've been following you for a little while. You cover retro games, you cover the whole shebang, the absolute whole shebang. You've seen the journey of where games have kind of come to all across the years. So for yourself, what's the next step? Do you think what I'm trying to say is, do you think microtransactions are here to stay? Do you think the typically poor business practices are here to stay, or do you think they're a phase and the next gen is going to be a little bit different?
We're going to see it a little bit longer. I've had people tell me that they think that what's probably going to happen in 10 years, because I don't know, the next 5 years is still going to be loot crates and season passes and crappy buy the DLC before it's made kind of stuff. But I think in 10 years, I do think that everything's going to be a Netflix style thing. I've actually talked to different people that have basically said that, like, Sony wants PlayStation Now to be everywhere. Like the way that Xbox Live is doing it, I've heard everybody wants to do what they're doing, which is like you pay for Games Pass and you get every Microsoft game. I've heard a bunch more like people saying like they want 100 million people to pay $5 a month instead of having 10 million people paying $60 every 3 months. So I think that's what's going to happen is pretty soon you're just going to have your controller and maybe some sort of set-top box that does install the games, and you just pay like your PlayStation fee for that month, and it'll install like everything. Which, for better or for worse, it is going to be weird to think about. We're probably going to have like a Capcom pass to play all the Resident Evils, but we'll see. This is like 10 years away, but that's what I think is going to happen eventually. So no more microtransactions, yay! But if you forget to pay your Capcom fee, then you literally can't play a Resident Evil.
Indeed, and I suppose, you know, you're obviously a retro gamer as well. Having hard copies of things, you know, there's still a lot of people that are hung up on buying digital stuff because, you know, 10, 15 years down the line, the servers aren't up, that's it. So on that point, why did you think Google Stadia failed as hard as it did? Because to me, that's a perfect Netflix style streaming platform that, to me, no one's talking about it anymore. It's just completely disappeared.
Well,
It's branding. That's the thing. It's just bad branding. I think if it had any exclusives, if they had managed to advertise it better, like, let's face it, 80% of the games market now is hype. It's being excited for it. Like, look at chat right now. People are wanting us to talk about the Resident Evil 8 Village and like Resident Evil 4 remake leaks and stuff. And that's because we want to get excited for stuff years before we even play it. And I think the problem is that Google Stadia came out on stage and said, hey, how do you feel about all the games you already own, but now streamed, lower quality, and for a monthly fee maybe? Oh, wait, they're actually $60 each, but everywhere else they're $20. Like, I think the thing is that if they had hyped it up more of like, this is going to be the future of gaming, and they actually set out what that was going to be, like, 100%, if they had just come out on stage and said, this is Google Stadia, do you want 200-person battle royale, a special new like standalone Fortnite thing, it would have been a success. Straight up. I think if they just managed to change it a little bit more to be like why it's supposed to be special instead of just it's a crappier version of your PlayStation, I think it would have probably taken off.
Yeah, and on that note, oh, sorry, Jesse, were you going to say something, my friend?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I think a lot of it too is it's just a tad bit ahead of its time. Like, I think, you know, I totally agree that we're going to a place of digital only or stream only or subscription only, but I don't think we're there just yet. So I think, you know, Stadia's biggest issue was kind of like your namesake, for say, the Dreamcast. Like, it's just a tad bit. Not well fleshed, you know, not as fleshed out as its competitors, but also just slightly ahead of its time as well.
I think that's a fair statement. And I think, to me, Google Stadia, it did represent a step in the right direction. Like OnLive did it, PS Now's dabbling in it. But I think if they were going to do a subscription model, you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't have everything. So I think if they would have gone down, say, the Game Pass route and actually had like a monthly subscription where you get loads and loads of games, that would have made sense. But I think the problem is you had the subscription, you had the pro version, but you also had to buy the games as well. So it's very confusing. It was very ambiguous what their message actually, because to me it was like, wow, this is just gonna be the Netflix of games. Here's my month, here's my fucking $10.99 a month, $15 a month or whatever. Bob's your uncle. We're all good to go. But then Destiny's $50 and
well, their marketing was just all over the place.
Because if I'm not mistaken, there was a video that somebody, I can't remember the creator, but there's still features that they were talking about that they still haven't implemented.
Yeah, well, and I have still heard things about Google Stadia that have still not been revealed. I have heard people talk about like features and exclusive games that still haven't been shown, and some of the stuff that was like shown to me, it looks like these games were pretty far along. So it's confusing to me. It seems like they're trying to wait to like blow us away. It's like, bro, the ship is sailing away. Like, if you don't wow us right now, it's going to be sunk.
Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of media is with you don't jump on it fast enough. It's just your opportunity's gone. That's what I've argued with Resident Evil Resistance, for example, since its launch. Like, you know, it's cool that they keep bringing out these new updates and stuff, but I feel like a lot of this content should have been brought out at the beginning because the interest just isn't there anymore.
Yeah, have you looked at the tweets every time they tweet like, "Hey guys, what's another update for Resident Evil Resistance?" It'll have like 23 likes and like one reply. It's, oh, dude, like,
Yeah, and it's always bring back the cut content from 3.
Yeah, where's Wesker? Everybody's just replying, "Where's Wesker?"
Where Wesker is, and that's the thing that we've had, because obviously every Resident Evil dedicated news website, every time we release updates to Resident Evil Resistance, because we want to cater to them people too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the comments just absolutely bomb. They're like, don't give a shit about this. I mean, Resident Evil Resistance can literally do amazing things now, but no one's going to care about it because it's just had its brand completely shat all over because of it doesn't it's not the it was associated with Resident Evil 3 and as a byproduct. I think it's a pretty good game. It's got its flaws, but all games are. If they had ironed it out, it could be good. But I think they're ruining it at the moment. They're too slow with updates. The roadmap is all over the place. I wish they would have.
I think it's that they don't care about the day-to-day. I think the weird thing about Resident Evil Resistance is that Resident Evil 7 had a huge sales tell. Like, people were buying Resident Evil 7 still just millions of copies sometimes for weeks and weeks, months and months and months. And then they saw that same thing with the Resident Evil 2 remake, just selling and selling and selling and selling and selling and selling. So I think with Resident Evil 3, they're like, okay, if this just keeps selling even close to those numbers, we need this extra thing that's going to keep people talking about it. So I think it's that even if Resident Evil Resistance sucks, even if it never really gets properly balanced, it'll keep making that package look sweet enough that they'll keep getting new people to buy into it. So I don't think we're ever going to get any Resident Evil 3 DLC. They're working on Resident Evil 4 probably, even though it's a different team. But I think that Resident Evil Resistance, it's not even made to be good. It's made to keep selling.
Oh no, agreed. So on that point, obviously dedicated Resident Evil page, what did you think of Resident Evil 3 when you played it?
I wish it was a little bit. I think I have the main problem that everybody has, which is that missing clock tower. You really feel it. The fact that you actually go to the base of it and fight a boss that's literally jumping around the clock tower, and then there's a cutscene that basically teleports you to the other side of it. It really feels like something that's cut, and that really bothers me a lot. Other than that, though, I still think that the new voice acting is good. I think the new lines they've added. I like the fact that Carlos feels more like a guy person. He feels more like somebody who was tricked by Umbrella. And that's something they never actually showed in the original Resident Evil 3. They did that more in the Resident Evil books and the Resident Evil comics. But in the games, they never really showed that Carlos was like, oh my God, I'm working for the terrorists. So I like the fact that in the game, it's showing more of him being like, oh crap. Okay, let's evacuate people. Like, screw the orders. So yeah, I liked a lot about it, but I wanted more, which I guess is a good problem to have, is wanting more of a good thing. But that clock tower would have made it a much bigger deal to me.
Oh, agreed. And I do get that vibe. And we've discussed this before, haven't we, Jesse, about how it was obviously handled, but I feel like Resident Evil 2 remake had a lot of more love poured into it. It feels like they really understood what. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm patronizing developers here with Resident Evil 3, but I just felt like Resident Evil 2 remake, it just knew what it wanted to be. But Resident Evil 3 remake, it still doesn't know what it wants. Does it want to be an action game again, or does it want to have the traditional survival horror elements? That's the vibe I get. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that though is, you had a outside team working on it. They were also developing it alongside Resident Evil 2. So a lot of the work and attention went into the larger game of the two. And I think that's what kind of made it lose its way a little bit, was just that there wasn't enough focus and energy and team available to focus on it. So I think that could have helped a little bit, or had they just because they were supposed to release at the same time initially, according to the developers now. So I think had we not got Resident Evil 2 and 3 till maybe this year as a package deal, I think as much as Resident Evil 2 Remake was good, I think we could have probably seen an even better product and probably seen a better product of 3 overall, and maybe a more, a flowing package there.
I don't think that's a bad thing to say. I think that's pretty reasonable. And I mean, how many times have you actually played Resident Evil 3, Max?
I've done.
Is it just once, or?
I think I've done 4. I think I've done 4 playthroughs of the RE3 remake. But I think maybe my problem is that I've done at least 25 or 30 runs, bare minimum, of Resident Evil 3 original, and I've done about 20 runs of the Resident Evil 2 remake. I used to do speed runs. I don't know if y'all ever knew this, but I've done about 150 times of the original Resident Evil 2. I was trying to set a world record for a while, so I used to beat it again and again and again. So I think I'm accidentally looking at it from such a fanboy lens, and I can't fully remove that. Like, I know all the cool nods and stuff. I see what they're trying to do with the Resident Evil 3 remake, and the fact that they're so close to nailing it ends up kind of bothering me.
Oh yeah, and that's actually a really good point. And I discuss this when I do a lot of streams of Resident Evil over on our Facebook page, and I always say, like, the first Resident Evil remake done such a good job of the original mansion story that really, unless you got your rose tinted sunglasses on, you just want to go back and have a little bit of fun with Barry and his this hall is dangerous. Unless you want to go back and have really a laugh. Resident Evil remake, what I'm saying is you don't really need to go back and play the original. But I still feel like with Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, they're just not at that Resident Evil 1 remake level where it completely makes the previous renditions of them games redundant. Like, I'll still play all 4 scenarios of Resident Evil 2 on the PS1, and the same with Resident Evil 3, because they're just a different vibe. They're just they just still do it for me, like, not how the others. I'd like to know your thoughts on that, Max. Like, what do you?
I mostly agree. It 99% does for me. I think it 99% does, and we know, because we're hardcore fans. Like, that's what Capcom's goal was from the beginning. Is they said the reason we're not calling it Resident Evil 3 remake or Resident Evil, like, whatever remake in the title, is because we wanted to replace the original. This is the new Resident Evil 3, the new Resident Evil 2, and for me, the Resident Evil 2 remake, I mean, I could be fine if for some reason people like deleted every copy of RE2 out of existence except for the remake. I'd probably be okay. I literally like the remake that much. I think it just does so much correctly. Resident Evil 3, I'd be upset, but like the Resident Evil 2 remake just does it so well for me.
How did you? Because again, you've probably played Resident Evil 2 remake to absolute death. How did you feel about how they done the scenarios? Like the first and second scenario.
Yeah, I still, that's obviously, it feels slimmed down from how different scenario A and scenario B were, but I'm still okay with it, I guess, because the city itself is so much more alive. When I was playing Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1 back in the day, and of course the superior Dreamcast version, it was so much of an A to B. It felt like it was like, all right, it's police station, it's lab, it's these plant monsters. It was almost like a checklist of cool lined up scenarios. You could see that it was very much based on, really cheesy B horror movies. That's what the inspiration was. Whereas the Resident Evil 2 remake, I liked that it was more about like getting to explore the character of Raccoon City, seeing the people running from zombies, actually seeing like the barricaded doors and the names written on the chalkboard as they're crossed out one by one. Like, when you're exploring the police station in the remake, you get so much more of a sense of the fact that like these cops didn't suck at their job. They were basically killed just by overwhelming forces. I don't know. That wins me over so much that I don't miss the scenario B too much.
Well, I think that's a lot of beauty in Capcom's storytelling, is their ability to craft an environment. For all of its flaws, Resident Evil 3, being able to go through the streets of Raccoon City on current gen hardware was just absolutely gorgeous. Like it was like the Resident Evil 2 remake. The environment told the story. You got the despair, the absolute chaos from the environment. And that seems to be where Capcom's doing a lot of its storytelling now, to kind of, go into Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village. Like, they're literally titling their game after the environment, which I think is kind of a smart move on Capcom's part, because they have been knocking it out of the park as far as letting their environment set the tone and set the kind of, the expectation of the gameplay, between beautiful graphics or just layout. Capcom's doing absolutely outstanding storytelling with just solely environmental.
Yeah, no, agreed.
That's a great point. Holy dude, I didn't even think of that. You just blew my mind there. That's really well, because you totally nailed it. Yeah, like the art of Capcom now is environment. So it's really interesting that the next game is just basically Resident Evil environment. Oh my god, bro, that's really good. I never connected that dot. That's great.
And that is a perfect segue, because I want to do a little bit of picture association here. What did you feel when you saw this?
I mean, the first thought I thought when I saw that is, oh my god, the leaks were true, because I read a bunch of the leaks on the website, and I was like, oh my god, they really are going to do evil Chris Redfield. It is weird that he looks like a guy who's been doing steroids for like 3 or 4 years, and his body doesn't know how to properly shape itself anymore. But I'll take bulky Chris Redfield.
Okay, what did you think of the? Because we streamed it live, the reveal. Again, your channel was and that's how we both kind of cross forces effectively. Is you mentioned us in one of your recap videos and some of your leak videos. What did you think when you first saw the trailer in full?
So much better than I ever could have thought. Like I like that there's so much leaning into the dreary darkness of Resident Evil. Like, in my opinion, the reason that Resident Evil's worked from the very beginning is like the illusion of claustrophobia. Like, of course, this is just programmed monsters popping out and going rawr, but they managed to make it feel like you're trapped in this police station or you're trapped in these spooky labs. And as soon as I saw that trailer, I was like, they did it. They're still managing. They're going to give us a whole village, but still have that really tight-knit claustrophobia to it. Since they're going to be leaning into werewolves, I don't know. It seems so cool. Like, it's still going to be like you stuck. I hope it takes place the way Resident Evil 7 is like one day. I am hoping that Resident Evil 8 is kind of the same thing, of where it's going to be like you stumble into the village of werewolves and it's just the storyline until dawn, because it looks so tight-knit.
Oh yeah, great. And again, being Resident Evil fans, we were absolutely blown away. But also more blown away that we didn't have egg on our face, and the leaks were actually
right. Yeah,
because you would be surprised. When we put these back out, and I'll splice in the article in just a second. But when we originally put these out, I mean, Jesse will elaborate on this, but we got absolutely destroyed because people were like, this is so far fetched. It can't be Resident Evil. Someone's pulling your leg here, and like big content creators. Yeah,
I know,
Jesse.
I saw that. Yeah, some of those people. Sorry, yeah, I saw a couple like real big Resident Evil people. Like, this is so obviously fake, and I was like, because I've been reading the website forever, so I was like, this might be real. I can't tell. So it's funny. Oh, that was so good.
Yeah. Well, my whole thing about it is when we first got the information, I was like, it sounds so far-fetched. There's no way it's fake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I struggled with it a lot, because we sat on information for months before we released it. And I was like, I don't know. Like, it's far-fetched, but why would somebody lie about this? If this was Resident Evil reunion, essentially, with, somebody said, oh, Barry's coming back, Wesker's coming back, Sherry's going to be there, all these, all the like kind of like fan, Billy Cohen, like all these people that, haven't been in games in forever. Somebody would have said that, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds fake. But when somebody comes and says, oh yeah, hey, I've seen the gameplay, I've seen the demos, there's going to be, quote unquote witches, werewolves. It's got kind of a supernatural feel to it. It's just one of those things you hear and you're like, why Resident Evil? Like, why would you make that up in the first place? So, like I said, it was one of those things that to me, I understood why people had the feeling that we were making it up because it sounded so far-fetched, but it had the actual opposite effect on me, where it sounds too far-fetched to be made up.
Oh God, you just see this article again gets me so freaking excited, man. I'm so ready for this game. I hope we get a demo. I really hope we get a demo.
And that is again, you're a console guy, obviously Dreamcast guy.
Yep.
That's something that's fascinating. We will. I do want to talk a little bit more about how you became Dreamcast guy, and why specifically Dreamcast guy. But there is talk that Resident Evil 8, even though Jesse will elaborate on this, but the playtest was done on PlayStation 4 Pro. It's not actually going to have a PlayStation 4 port. It's just going to be straight up next gen. I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Mine or Jesse?
Sorry, you, Max.
Oh yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I've heard from different people I've talked to privately that a lot of people have been working on stuff for years and years and years, and it's almost ready to see the light of day. And now Sony and Microsoft are basically trying to get as many dev kits out there as possible to make sure that like year 1 and 2 of next gen is as packed as possible. And so a lot of people are being like, okay, the architecture is close enough that we can make an upgraded version of our almost complete game. So it totally makes sense to me that like there was a playable version of this on PS4, and they were like, well, we can do this entire thing with 0 load times on this console over here and make it look better. Let's just go ahead and do that. So to me, it makes sense. It's a little bit shocking, I feel like, if people don't have the insider knowledge, but to me, it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into the technical elements of it, but I don't want to get into technical elements, but I suppose it's what happens with Call of Duty. It's what happens with games like FIFA, Madden. I do feel like they hold themselves back by current hardware and not just going whole hog and pushing forward to what, even though we know the RE engine is stupidly optimized, super super, you can change a lot of it, especially the PC version of like the recent titles, just so many different configurations. It can work on something like a massive gaming computer all the way down to one of those GPD Win things. So it's super optimized. But I suppose, I really believe it's a good idea.
Wasn't there like an interesting statement recently that the RE engine technically doesn't stand for Resident Evil engine? It stands for Remake Engine, and they're building it so that like all future Capcom games can run on it for the next couple of years. Because I think they said something of like, even though you're only seeing it as these first person games, we could, like, somebody basically pitched it as like they could just do Devil May Cry 6 could be in this engine as well, because it's just that optimized. It's just like whatever you want to build in there. We're using it for horror right now, but you could put whatever you want in there. So it's like, oh, it's their Decima now.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. I mean, what's it been? The last 3 games, Jesse?
Yeah, well, 4 technically, or no, because Resistance is still made in RE engine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that was technically a standalone project, so you're right. Yeah, 4.
So I mean, I think the RE engine's here to stay. I mean, Capcom, I won't say they hold onto an engine as long as say Bethesda does, but our Capcom doesn't really change engines a lot. So I could see at least the next 2 to 4 major titles from Capcom, and I'm not saying that per franchise within Capcom, but I would say we'd get probably another 4 games out of the RE engine before they start looking at maybe eyeballing something else. So I think the RE engine's got at least, like I said, 2 to 4 games, 3 to 4 years, somewhere in there before we see something new, and I'm totally fine with that. I love the way the RE engine looks. I think it's one of for any Resident Evil game, obviously, accounting for the fact that, graphic advancement has came and went over the past couple of years. I think it's the best engine Capcom's had for its time. I always felt like some of the older Capcom titles, while the games look good for their age, you could always tell that maybe Capcom's engine was, game engine wasn't as strong as maybe some of its competitors at the time. So I feel like the RE engine kind of puts Capcom on a level playing field with other developers. So I'm excited to see what the RE engine brings forward going into next gen, and then seeing where Capcom goes for there with the engine.
And we're not used to not seeing Resident Evil, like multiple Resident Evil games being on the same or at least similar engines. I mean, it wasn't Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil 2 and 3 on the same engine?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they must have been.
Yeah, well, because didn't they make them practically simultaneously? It was like a back-to-back, like one dev period, basically.
Yeah, it was like, hey, we just released Resident Evil 2. Code Veronica's not ready yet, so you got 6 months.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And
they did that with I don't know if you knew this, Final Fantasy 8 and 9 were made at the same time, which is weird because they look and play so 100% different. But apparently they were like, okay, we know the PlayStation 2 is coming up. We want to have 2 more Final Fantasies ready because they're still really cheap to make. So they made Final Fantasy 8 literally at the same time, like same studios making these. I don't know. I love when that type of stuff happens where simultaneously designed. It's so funny to me.
Well, and actually that's, kind of a interesting thing to say too is, Resident Evil Village and 3/Resistance and possibly 2 to an extent were all developed during the same time. Like Capcom's been super ambitious, whether people have liked the remakes and some of the side projects going on. The Resident Evil team at Capcom has been super busy because we know from the old ambassador program emails that the Resident Evil Village playtesting started last year. So that means it had a playable demo last year, 2018, or 2019. So it's got to have at least been in production since 2017, 2018 to get to the point for a demo. So they were working on Village the same time that they were finalizing 2. At the same time, they were getting 60% of the way with Resident Evil 3. So, it seems like Capcom just kind of stacked all their projects at one time.
And they're working, man. They're selling so fast. That's the thing is like, this is like the most profitable era maybe ever for Capcom. So I think at this point, they're really trying to be like, okay, like, let's see how fast we can make this car go. Like, let's really shovel all the fuel in there.
Well, and 7 is still one of it's still a stupidly selling title.
It's
like
crazy.
What was it? I think maybe back in December we put out an article just based off of some sales charts and stuff from Capcom where it was still selling like neck and neck with PlayStation. Resident Evil 2. But obviously there's a difference there for 2 being the newer game, but it was holding its own. And the VR actually sells even stronger than the vanilla game. So, this has been literally the best time to be a Capcom stockholder for sure.
Indeed, and that's a really good point actually. And I hear this comment a lot online. They're going, Capcom releasing too many games. They're releasing too many games in such a short space of time. Well, let's not forget, Resident Evil was basically Madden in the late 90s. It had a yearly release. It had, aside from the 1.5 debacle between 1996 and 1998, it was Resident Evil 1, 1996, Resident Evil 2, 1998, Resident Evil 3, 1999, Survivor, Code Veronica. It was a yearly release. So I don't know why people are shocked.
You skipped Director's Cut there. Director's Cut was technically a 97 game.
Yeah, it was kind of an apology, wasn't it?
Yeah.
when studios did apologies to fans.
Well, it's so funny because I feel like the main thing that current Resident Evil fans forget is now the series is very refined. So we are getting things like Revelations tucked in there and stuff, but we used to get so many bad spinoffs. Like, look, I've beaten every Resident Evil game. Some of them are great. But God, stuff like Survivor. I love Gaiden, but let's face it, Gaiden was not a good game. It was basically an RPG. It was just like, now at least, even a bad, you want to put giant air quotes around bad here, a bad Resident Evil game like Resident Evil 3 Remake blows away every other bad spinoff we got in the 90s. So I'll take it.
Yeah, no, agreed. And on that point, nice little segue. What is your favorite Resident Evil game?
It's a tough call. I think I have to say Code Veronica. Code Veronica, it's hard. It's the original Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica and kind of 2 Remake. They're so close, I kind of have to group them together. But I'll say that Code Veronica is really the one that blew me away the most. It's just like, it was some of the first HD graphics I ever saw. It was some of the most, I like the fact that it was our first time seeing the full-on militarization of Umbrella, because I'd read all the Resident Evil books before I played Resident Evil Code Veronica. So I'd already seen them talk about secret islands and crazy multi-layered facilities, but that was the first time where we got to see like a character running around in the labs of like, oh, this is our room for, here's a bridge that goes to this biohazard area. I don't know. I liked Code Veronica so much. And I don't know, it was cool that it also had 2 playable characters in one main story. There was just a lot of stuff in there that it felt like it felt so experimental.
And
plus,
definitely has nothing to do with the fact it was originally a Dreamcast exclusive.
Well, I mean, I'll admit some of that was that bias for sure. Of like, as I was learning the Dreamcast, that was the first I was playing through all the Resident Evils on there with the HDMI mod, so you could actually, or not the HDMI mod, the VGA mod. So I was playing them in HD. They were some of the first HD games I ever played. So, I mean, yeah, I'll admit that made an impression on me as well, of like seeing the cool lighting effects. I was like, oh my God, the Dreamcast.
So, Dreamcast guy, where did it come from? Why Dreamcast?
So long ago, like, gosh, what, 22 years ago or so, I don't even know, many ages ago, when the Dreamcast was kind of on the way out, my mom had to go away, and she never came back. And when she was leaving, she was like, I'll buy you any gift you want. We have Christmas coming up. I'll buy you anything you want. And being a little kid, I didn't really like understand the brevity of the situation. So I was like, well, I want a Sega Dreamcast, Mom. I think that'd be a cool gift. And so Mom goes away. I get the Dreamcast. I play it for a while. And then eventually I kind of just put it in my closet and kind of forgot about it until high school. And then when I was in high school, this guy came to me at a party one day. It was like a Halo LAN party. And I had the new Game Boy Advance SP, and he said, you have the Game Boy Advance SP? I really want it. I'll give you 100 Dreamcast games for it. I actually have them in a booklet right here. Straight trade. Let's give them right now. They're just games in a case. I don't have any of the fancy manuals or anything. I was like, sweet. So I spent the next couple of years extremely poor, and the only games I could play was this giant booklet of games that I still have today, which was those 100 Dreamcast games. So I actually went through and beat all these games that were, some of them were fantastic. Some of them were weird, obscure RPGs like Time Crisis, or was it called Timescape? And I played a bunch of these games and I loved them a bunch. And then when I started working, I decided that I was going to track down every single Dreamcast game. So I got the nickname because I would go into these stores and hound these poor employees of, hey man, you got any Dreamcast games at the back? You got any Dreamcast stuff? And so I used to go to these like thrift shops all the time. And one day I walked in there, I was like, oh, you guys got anything in the back? And they went, oh great, the Dreamcast guy's here. So when I made my YouTube account, that was my only nickname. So when I was making my YouTube account, I was like, Dreamcast guy. I didn't realize that it had become this thing, it was my only nickname. So that's what I put it there. So.
And what's your favorite game on the Dreamcast?
I like Shenmue a lot, but I think by a small margin, I'm still so obsessed with Skies of Arcadia. I like turn-based combat. I really like that there's actually a lot of mystery to the world of Skies of Arcadia. Nobody ever really explains the floating continents, and there's like this murky underworld. I don't know. There's so much about that game that's so freaking fun, and it works so well, and I actually think it aged really well. So I think Skies of Arcadia is still my number one.
Okay, and what we're talking about late 90s, perfect time for Resident Evil.
Hell yeah!
What's your earliest memories of Resident Evil? I mean, was you like super late into the cycle, or was you there from the start?
I was pretty much there at the start, and I just want to say, Jesse, I love your background Sega Saturn. I have that. I have it on. I have the American one, but people don't know how rare that thing is, man. I love it.
Show the people, Jesse. Grab it.
Nice.
Am I?
Nice. Here, just for fun, let me grab my American one because I'm overly proud of it. I have it right here.
This is totally unintentional, but glorious.
Isn't this like the funny game of like if you beat it, you could get a gold tyrant to show up and kill you or something, right?
Yeah.
That's what made the Sega Saturn version special.
I love the long box. I love the long box.
Oh, I know they break so much. I've got like 12 of them, and I think 1 or 2 are broken.
Well, that's it. I mean, obviously, you're familiar with how the PAL region does. Dreamcast and the old PlayStation 1, they're in like the jewel cases like that, absolutely prone to falling apart. But I don't know. For me, like, you guys remember what Jesse's got, them style of CD cases for PS1 games and Dreamcast games. But for me, those style of boxes was what I remember.
Yeah,
and,
they're so big. So sorry, yeah, classic Resident Evil. So since I grew up really, really poor, it was kind of this interesting thing where nobody ever got the same game in the entire neighborhood. There were only a couple kids with game consoles, and we would try and like strategically make it where, all right, you get Resident Evil 1, I'll get Resident Evil 2 or whatever. Like we had to like really kind of plot out our Christmases to make sure, because nobody was like, there was not enough like money collectively in this neighborhood for anybody to get 2 of a game. So from the very beginning, there was a kid up the street named Bradley who got Resident Evil 1 pretty much right after it came out. And that game scared the ever living hell out of me, but like in such a positive way. I don't think I'd ever seen a horror game before that. This to me, we were like maybe a year or 2 behind the release of the PlayStation. But when I finally played it, whoa. And then Resident Evil 2 had a much bigger impact on me for sure, because when Resident Evil 2 came out, having multiple playable characters, and because of that, people would actually trade the discs around because we were all poor. Like somebody would like play the Claire disc for a night, and then people would lend you the Leon disc for a night. So discovering the second scenario and stuff, we didn't have strategy guides or anything. So when we started realizing that you could like play through all these alternate scenarios and see extra stuff and unlocking the hunk and tofu missions and stuff, it was so impactful. It definitely was the first time where I kind of realized, like, this is more than just playing a video game. We are gamers. Like, we are the people who play these games better than the other kids in the playground. It was really, really, really impactful for me.
So you're obviously a big fan of survival horror in general. I mean, Resident Evil to me is the absolute pinnacle of survival horror. I feel like it does stuff that other survival horror series don't do. But what are highlights for you with other survival horror games? What are your favorites?
I have a lot. I kind of like a little bit more obscure stuff. I really like Blue Stinger. Blue Stinger tried to be a almost Christmas ripoff of Resident Evil. You get trapped on this island during Christmas time, and there's like these zombies and stuff, and you get some guns, but a lot of it's like melee combat based. But there will be happy Christmas music while you're beating people up. It's very, very quirky and kind of almost satirical horror. I really like Silent Hill, though. I am super obsessed with Silent Hill, to the point at which I've tracked down like the rare Silent Hill comics and stuff. I like those a lot. There's a lot of different stuff. Honestly, the biggest thing is I'm probably one of the most hardcore defenders of Evil Within 1 and 2. I love Evil Within 1 and 2 so freaking much. And it's kind of weird to me that people kind of like shit talk them so much online, because I do feel like they are some of the most, they're a good current like thing to play in between Resident Evils. I like that they're so psychological and weird, but do still have, over the shoulder aiming and save one bullet style, like ammo conservation. I definitely like those a lot.
Well, what kind of kills me about that is, the same people that'll say, well, it wasn't that good, or the same people like, man, I wish, Shinji Mikami would come back to Capcom and make another Resident Evil. And then it's like, oh, well, actually he did. I think, for what the Evil Within are as games, like they're brilliant. I mean, they're such a testament to how creative he can be. And I think, had he stayed with Capcom and made more Resident Evil, we would have probably it would have been, Resident Evil, insert something here. It might have been a spin-off title like Veronica, or not Veronica, Revelations.
That's when I got to meet Shinji Mikami while they were doing the press circuit for Evil Within. There was like a VIP thing, and I think I just crossed 60 or 70,000 subscribers, and they randomly reached out to me, and they're like, would you like to to come meet Shinji Mikami. So I have the cringiest picture in the world. I'm like standing next to like the guy who invented Resident Evil. And it's so awkward because I'm trying to take a selfie, but I'm also afraid of offending him. So he's just super like this guy is freaking out. So he decides to like kindly lean in closer to me, but I'm just like, such a great thing. He's so cool, man. I love those games for sure.
Oh no. Yeah. I mean, it's, you just don't get the same feeling with other titles, I would suggest. Just on the point of the whole Resident Evil timeline, did you ever get derailed or a little bit in contempt with Resident Evil from when it went from its original kind of series? Think of it like Star Wars. You've got kind of the original series, then you had another set of 3 series, and then another set of 3 series. That's kind of how I like to split Resident Evil up. So when it started going into more RE4, RE5, RE6 action horror, and then it finally returned back to traditional survival horror, what was your feelings when Capcom went through these changes with Resident Evil?
I loved Resident Evil 4. My major problem with 4 was the fact that the intro movie for Resident Evil 4 just basically completely dismisses Umbrella after spending basically 4 games, counting 0, like building up the threat of like the idea of Umbrella as this super company, just having an opening cutscene that's like Umbrella sucks, LOL. That kind of bothered me, but then the rest of 4 was good. And then 5 felt like it was trying to get back to like, all right, we are going to have like super monsters and like scripted boss fights. And I was like, okay, this is cool again. I like the co-op a lot. I'm a huge fan of co-op. Resident Evil 6 completely lost me. I despise Resident Evil 6 to the point in which it almost seems like it just doesn't understand the characters. Like Leon feels like he's trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger with the amount of like one-liners he does and stuff. Like, guess you lost your head. It's like, shut up right now. So I don't know. Those kind of lost me, but I guess what I've always come to appreciate the most about Resident Evil is that if you hate one, just wait for the next one. They're constantly reinventing it. They're remixing the formula. Oh, that one was weird. Okay, well, the next one's going to be Resident Evil Dead Aim. It's a first-person shooter on a boat, but with Resident Evil controls. You know, every game manages to stand on its own so much and then add to the narrative. So I like that you can treat it like a cafeteria. You can pick the parts you like and skip what you don't and still get the full product.
That's an absolutely glorious way of putting it. I've never even thought about thinking about it like that, but that's absolutely right. They're constantly reinventing themselves. What did you feel like when Resident Evil 7 came out? When they'd gone on this, to me, they'd gone on this trend of action horror games, and if you know, it was always one. Oh, Resident Evil finally going to go back to their roots. You know, what did you feel like when Resident Evil 7, and just your overall opinion on the game?
So I loved Resident Evil 7. It scared me to the point in which one of my first playthroughs actually turned the brightness up to maximum on the game because there were so many shadowy corners and those gooey monsters, the mold beasts, were so spooky to me. I had a person reach out to me and leak some stuff to me, like an alpha tester for Resident Evil 7 reached out to me right before the initial reveal and was telling me like, bro, there's this new first-person horror version of Resident Evil 7 that's almost done. They're about to reveal it. It is the most terrifying thing. I've been having nightmares for weeks, and I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So when I finally got a chance to play for myself, it is so freaking good. I like it. I like that it has a big plot twist. I actually think not a lot of Resident Evils have a plot twist. So the fact that we see the gooey old lady little kid at the end, I don't know. There's so much about that game that I definitely think worked. And I kind of respect the fact that there's only a couple monsters. Like in the whole game, there's only a couple monster types. There's like crawling gooey guys, standing gooey guys, and then like the bakers. And that's pretty much it. And I kind of like that it is just like, I don't know, it feels like body horror or backyard horror. It almost feels like an indie movie after somebody made the Avengers. I like that.
Yeah, well, I think I brought that up with Avalanche on last weekend when he was on our podcast. Was 7 is a soft, like almost like a soft reboot of the series, period. Just because limited enemy types. You're in a huge house. You've kind of ill-prepared, ill-equipped. It's literally Resident Evil 1 just in the swamps of Louisiana instead of the mountains of the Midwest. You get 2 houses developed by George Trevor, umbrellas somehow involved. Like I mean, literally Resident Evil 7 is just a soft reboot of Resident Evil 1.
Dude, so my favorite moment of that game, so I played it about a week before it came out, so there were no instruction videos, there was no puzzle guides. Somebody sent me the disc. I didn't even get the official one from Capcom at that time. Somebody just sent me a disc in the mail, so I was playing it. And when I first got out of the first house, because I almost thought that was the end of the game, because it took me so long to like solve these puzzles and get the 3 keys to open up the front door. And as soon as I went out there and you go outside and see like the sky for the first time since the game began, and it's pitch black out, and it's just like, it hit me like such a brick of like, this is what horror is supposed to be like. It's such great modern horror. Like, you have controls, you have ammo, you have freedom, and you still feel fucked. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, that's a great way of putting it. And it had an absolute ton of references to old horror, like Evil Dead, and obviously the concept of walking around a backwater house and someone stalking you, and it was almost slasher movie at some parts. I felt, especially with is it Jack following you around?
Yeah, Jack, yeah. Yeah, Jack was almost. Yeah, I mean, Jack was, just a kind of a swampy, hickish Jason. Voorhees as far as like the mechanic goes. Like
Swamp. They should put that on there. It's just Swamp Jason. How do you feel about Swamp Jason?
Well, I mean, but that's the thing though. Like and Andy has a good point. Like, it had so many callbacks to everything that makes horror film good. Especially like when it comes to more campy, like 80s B horror, like, the Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, it had so many of those, like, all in. And a lot of it, you definitely kind of tell, like, the kind of like Cabin in the Woods, the Evil Dead references and stuff just by the setting alone.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, like Jack's mechanic being very reminiscent of a persistent threat, kind of like Jason from the Friday the 13th series, or even Evelyn's kind of weird mind takeover thing, kind of almost like a Freddy Krueger-esque like dream sequence and stuff. So like, there's so much that makes horror enjoyable that's in Resident Evil 7, and you can tell like everybody on that team just had to absolutely be like massive horror fans to be able to stuff all that into one game and make it work.
Did you ever? There's a super old Game Informer, when Game Informer was first revealing stuff about Dead Space. I guess it was like 2009, 10, somewhere in there. And they were first talking about Dead Space. They said that when they were coming up with the idea for it, they went to a cabin for like 2 months and just way out in the woods watched hundreds of horror movies and tried to study what made them scary. Like, is it the fact that this person's being ripped apart? Or is it the fact that Leatherface has this giant chainsaw? Like, what technically makes this the gooey spookiness that we want? And they turn that into Dead Space. And it feels like they almost managed to take that same sort of theory into it. Like, you're totally right, Jesse, in that it's like, it's almost the science of frights for sure in 7.
Well, yeah, and I feel like, obviously we haven't seen a lot of 8 yet. But I feel like that's almost like the same approach we're seeing here, just with, there's a lot of memes that went around about like Bram Stoker's Dracula, in references to 8. And I think those are absolutely spot on from, what we've seen of the game, and obviously, what information we've received about the game over the past several months, and then even some more currently that we haven't released yet. That's what I get. Like, I get the feeling that somebody just like really studied, Dracula, figured out what made it cool, what made it enticing, and like, okay, how can we, make this horror? How can we make it Resident Evil? Because a lot of it just seems like a lot of it's too on the nose for it to just purely be coincidence. Like if somebody, if somebody on the, dev team for 7 tried saying, oh yeah, we really didn't try going for an Evil Dead feel, or Cabin in the Woods with 7. It'd be like, no, you definitely did. You can't say you didn't. And
Yeah.
I honestly feel that's what's going to happen with 8, and I hope maybe in a later interview or something, either Peter or any of the guys that connected to the dev team will be like, oh yeah, we totally big fans of Bram Stoker, and decided that we wanted to make Resident Evil Vampire,
Yeah. Well, that's why I like the GDC's been doing those post-mortems where after a game is out, after it's gotten all its DLC, after it's done selling millions of copies, they basically go in there and just kind of talk about the philosophies behind it. It'd be cool to see that about a Resident Evil, because I don't know if they've ever done one on a Resident Evil, but it'd be cool to just hear the guys talk about canceled builds and stuff, because a lot of times they'll show you like, oh, here's all these ideas we had that we just canceled because we couldn't figure them out. It'd be cool to see, like, because one of the leaks I heard about was that 7 at one point, there was a version of Resident Evil 7 that was third person that looked the way the Resident Evil 2 remake looks. And
what did you see the trailer for that? Because there was a trailer release for that.
I don't know if I did. That sounds so goofy.
It's like literally like a 15-minute trailer, or excuse me, a 15-second trailer. And it's all just it's Ethan standing in a hallway looking down at Evelyn's at the end of the hallway, but that was from the. It was only released in the West because they kind of Capcom wanted to test the Western market versus the Japanese market, and they were testing first person. Do what?
Is that available on like YouTube or something? Like that?
I'm sure you should. Somebody actually just shared it in Stars posting the other day, so it should be available somewhere. But that's from the earlier build from the game. And then Resident Evil 2 actually had a third person, or I think it had a first person build.
Yeah, you can totally see that. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar, Max, but there was a fantastic mod for the PC versions of 2 and 3 remake where they kind of they took the head off of the characters and put you in a first person view, but it felt so native. I actually feel like it was intended to be in the game and they just took it out for whatever reason.
So I did. I don't talk about mods very often on my channel because I'm much more review and news focused, but I did a video called like 6 mods that improve the Resident Evil 3 remake. And I talked about like a famous lighting mod and the ones that like open up the alleyways and stuff. And one of them I showed was the first person mod. And I said straight up, like, if you buy the Resident Evil 3 remake, install this mod immediately. Like, play your first playthrough, because Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, they almost feel like they were made because of how tiny hallways were and stuff. It's like, I don't think there's supposed to be a camera 6 feet behind me. I think it's supposed to be right here.
Well, yeah, and I mean, there was a lot of, there was, I think it's on our friend over at Kai Morgan over at Ink Ribbon. He did a video, about like just canceled RE concept, and a lot of his stuff from 2. He's got footage from, where there's supposed to be a more kind of what looks to be an AI system in RE2, either that or a actual multiplayer segments. With Leon and Claire traversing places in the RPD at the same time. Like, there's a lot of footage of that, so I think we could have seen a lot of interesting stuff, and going forward, it's going to be real cool to see which direction Capcom's go with camera angles, or just even like style of play in general.
Just on that point of Resident Evil 7, I want to do a little bit of a picture reaction for your Max.
All right, yeah, hit me with it.
What was your thoughts when you saw this?
I still don't understand. Is that really Chris Redfield, or was that a guy lying and saying he's Chris Redfield? Is that really Chris Redfield?
It is, because there was a DLC to Resident Evil 7 called Not a Hero. Yeah, and you actually play as Chris Redfield, and it's fully voice acted and everything like that. It, for all intents and purposes, is Chris Redfield, which is even more puzzling when you see Chris Redfield in RE8.
Yeah, and the developers did confirm that, because in some of the in the interview with Famitsu, they actually said, like, Chris and Ethan like know each other, they have history with each other. That they've all but confirmed, like, oh yeah, I mean, obviously they've confirmed, but that this is Chris Redfield in 7, but they're not backtracking. They're not trying to make it sound like Ethan met, Chris, Bluefield, like his clone or whatever. Like Capcom, Capcom is saying, hey, no, that was Chris Redfield. Him and Ethan are friends now, and we're not going to tell you why, but Chris is going to shoot his friend's wife in the face.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that, because I honestly thought when we heard about a redesign from Chris, like the first thing that came to my mind was, okay, if we're going to, redesign a model, like literally a game later, maybe they want to do some kind of, the narrative of like, oh, that actually wasn't Chris Redfield. Haha, fans, you were right the whole time. That was, a fake. But it doesn't even seem like they're doing that. Like they're just retconning Chris Redfield, or, Seven's Chris Redfield altogether.
Wasn't there some sort of leak or there was something where that version of Chris Redfield was also in the code for the Resident Evil 2 remake, and the model is labeled Chris Redfield or something. So like we had multiple, like even in universe in data, it was like if it was a swappable skin at one point in the code for Hunk. And so I remember that kind of stirred up some speculation of like, is he supposed to be Hunk as well? Or
because that kind of fueled the fire for a downloadable battle mode coming back. When all the data miners found Chris Redfield's RE7 skin in the code, they're like, "Oh, yeah. battle mode confirmed." And then there was I remember the thing about Hunk, which I actually bought into.
I bought into it too.
Yeah, because I don't know if you remember or not, but I remember a Resident Evil Revelations trailer that made it really look like Chris Redfield was going to be Hunk. Yes, it's going to come up every single time.
I'm going to spice this in. You must have seen this, Max. You must have seen this.
There was
put that in for him.
There was an old trailer of Resident Evil Revelations where it looked like they were going to turn Hunk and Chris into the same person, and the scenes shown in the trailer never saw the light of day in the game. It was all cut.
Oh.
So it was kind of like, for me, it was a thing of like, like hearing people say, oh, well, it's a swappable skin for Hunk, almost felt like maybe Capcom was going to try to revive that storyline.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll take it you've played Revelations, Max.
Yeah, I've played Revelations 1 and 2, yeah. All right, so it's Chris Redfield in the boat, chilling out. This dude is so stacked. God, I need to get those kind of steroids.
And they chose to show Hunk in the trailer right there.
Yeah, that pretty heavily implies it.
Where was that in Resident Evil Revelations?
And it's been forever since I played Revelations, and I'm trying. I've got the plot in my head, but Jill and Chris don't up until only play together at the very end against was not Jack Norman or whatever his name is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, agreed. So again, Capcom love retconning stuff. So I don't know where this build of Resident Evil Revelations is, because this seems like this was like Evil Chris before Evil Chris in a way. So
this is the long lost Revelations 0.5, that nobody ever talks about.
Did you ever read the Resident Evil books by S.D. Perry?
I've read a handful of them. I haven't read all of them.
So I read. Oh God, most of you don't need to, but they're retellings of the games, and there's some in between books. But originally, when I read them, I thought they were almost like a refinement, because a lot of times they would explain why this character happened to be going into Raccoon City at that time, or you'd get to see like an extra like first person narrative part playing as Hunk or whatever. And so they added extra stuff. It almost seemed like they were trying to like trim down the fat of like plot twists and scenarios and stuff. So that's why it was so funny when Resident Evil 4 came out and they stopped doing the Resident Evil books and they still just threw everything away. Like Capcom just loved to just like press the reset button again and again and again.
Oh yeah, we've seen it. I mean, 4 got rebuilt 3 or 4 times, like all in all, before we finally saw. And really, out of that, we only really know of one of the Hookman demo, the 3.5 that everybody knows. But there's a airship build. And I know there's at least one other. And
the other one, I believe, was called Project Virus. And that was the one that was going to be almost entirely about him being infected and kind of the search for a cure. And that was apparently some of the earliest teaser art of him with the giant fluffy jacket on. Apparently that was the virus build. But who knows how far along. I mean, these games probably were super pre-alpha. They probably barely had anything done it before they scrapped it. But it's so weird to think that they even got into the graphic stages of any of this stuff.
Oh yeah, and I mean, but once they, like you said though, once Capcom hits the reset button, it's all gone.
Yeah.
Capcom's not the one to save anything.
And on that point of kind of bringing this full circle back to Resident Evil 8, where I really believe what we're seeing is a lot of the ideas from Resident Evil 3.5 in Resident Evil 8. We're seeing the almost hallucinations. I would suggest hallucinations, which is when I look at this, I think that whole scene with Mia and Ethan, and sorry, Ethan, 100% hallucination in my eyes.
100% fully agree.
I think that was a teaser just thrown into the trailer for us to think that he's evil, but I really think that is not correct. I don't think it's a clone. I don't think we're going to go down this whole Resident Evil movie thing of Chris and his 1,200 clones, and one of them was in Resident Evil 7. I really don't believe we're going to do that. But I believe that hallucinations are going to play a very, very big factor in Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, well, I think they're going to do that the way they can have some sorts of magic. I bet a lot of the early reveals and stuff are going to almost look like magical wolf beasts. And then over time, like towards the end of the game, we're going to see, oh man, I've been breathing all this gasoline or some shit. And then it's going to turn out, oh, it's a lab,
Well, yeah, it's the same way with Resident Evil 7. Everybody was like, oh, Resident Evil 7, like they're trying to go for, some kind of like psychological horror versus like a virus or whatever. And that's why you've got the little girl running around, almost like a ghost.
Yeah.
And then they explained it away with a virus. And that's just what kind of Resident Evil's done for a while. Or I mean, outside of, I think 5 and 6, kind of, was definitely always a viral narrative. But 1, would just just being fresh into zombies, like it not being like a stupidly popular medium, or I mean, it was kind of stupidly popular at the time, but a different medium for video games. You're like, oh god, what causes zombies? Like it was kind of to throw the player off, and then 4 to an extent, where Leon first encounters what he thought was a zombie. He's like, oh, these aren't zombies. So it kind of like threw you off a little bit of like, wait a minute, like, how is he being mind controlled? Like, how is this working? And then you realize that Plagas is just kind of a replacement for the viruses that Umbrella used. And then 7, like I said, bringing the hallucinations into it to a lighter extent, or just having a feeling of psychological, but actually just being explained by virus. And I think that's what we're going to see in 8 as well. Is everybody's going like, oh yeah, they've gone like supernatural or whatever with the narrative, and it's like, no, like if the T virus can turn a lizard into a hunter, why can't the T virus do this to another animal and make kind of a werewolf-esque creature?
We've also had like borderline magical storylines already, like the whole thing with Alexia. If I remember correctly, couldn't Alexia light you on fire with her mind? Like, pyrokinesis isn't real, folks. Like, we've already had some weird like magical borderline magical BS in here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just the whole that's the only thing that kills me. Is like people are like, well, it gets too far away from what's real for Resident Evil, and it's like, yeah, it's like, I don't know if you know this or not, bud, but none of this is like even remotely, even pseudo. Yeah. Like this is like way past like 5G conspiracy level pseudo side.
I mean, I always want to link them. Did y'all play the Umbrella Chronicles?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that fight when you're playing as Wesker, and those two twins show up, and they're like, they say some line of like, oh, these guys are like 1 in a billion humanity. They're like the perfect genome. In fact, the tyrant is based on their DNA. Like, they're so perfect. They're uninflicted. They have no viruses, but they're this perfect. And Wesker's like, I'm going to show you the power of Wesker. And you start literally matrix kicking off the wall. You're in this humongous, like, stadium-sized building, and you're jumping off the walls, literally hundreds, if not thousands of feet up, and shooting headshots perfectly every single time against these guys. And it's like, this is Resident Evil, folks. It's not the laboratory scenes. It's literally a guy being like, I'm the ultimate alpha male. You know, it's ridiculous.
And Jesse's brought this up before, and I don't want to steal his thunder here, but he's always like, this was one thing that we were talking about with the leaks, where everyone's like, there's going to be werewolves in the game. Not my Resident Evil. So werewolves aren't okay, but anything else in that's happened in Resident Evil is. That's
so not my Resident Evil.
Yeah, that's what that blows my mind. Is like, you draw the line at werewolves, which is kind of like a medium like we see all over the place. Like, it's not like, like somebody just like woke up one day and was like, oh, what would like a dog human hybrid look like? We've known about like werewolves have been a popular medium for years. So, but that's not acceptable. But let's take a flea and human DNA and inject T virus into it, and then boom, you get a brain sucker. Like, that makes sense. Like that makes sense, that you can take like a tiny flea, turn it into this like huge abomination by mixing human parts and some virus parts.
If you read all the extended like, there's like a bunch of developer notes, and some of it's been canonized. Weren't one of the hunters or one of the versions of Liquor is a rabbit. It's a rabbit that's been directly infected with the T virus that turns into this giant thing. So it's like, look, folks, like, this stuff's been basically magic since the beginning.
Yeah, I like literally, like, T virus is just magic. Like, it's it's what you sprinkle on something, and you sprinkle it on there, and boom, you get a new zombie.
I'm just picturing like a chef walking in, like, hello, today we're going to be cooking up some fresh frites. Today we got this fresh human body right here. Bam, put a little sprinkle on top. Now it's a zombie. Oh, is this your best friend? He's infected. Oh, no, now you got to kill your best friend. Ooh, this is like an episode of Saw. All right, cut your friend up. Let's do this. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, nothing should be held back at this point. At least they're somewhat taking it seriously. So let them go creatively, as balls to the walls as possible. Because if they're not restricted, then fantastic things can happen, I believe.
I just hope that they keep it still grounded in a way. I will say that I still have boundaries even to myself. I definitely think that I don't want there to ever be aliens. I like that characters aren't brought back from the dead. I think that the Resident Evil series makes its own rules and it bends its own rules, but it doesn't break its own rules. So I think that's why I'm so trusting of whatever the hell 8 turns into. And I just want to say quickly to everybody in chat, I see everybody in chat. Thank y'all so much. So many nice comments. So hello, everybody.
No, it's all good. No, we have a good community here, and this is a new platform as well, so it's starting to gain traction. Yeah, we're super grateful. But yeah, I mean, what have you got coming up? What else have you got coming up on the Dreamcast guy? I mean, I know obviously you're a heavy news channel, but what are kind of your aims for the future of Dreamcast guy? Where do you ultimately want to take it?
I'm always having fun. I like that. I feel like my fan base just kind of trusts me to create whatever. So I never feel creatively restricted, which is just the ultimate freaking freedom. I can review like this. Literally Thursday, I dropped a giant review for Paper Mario. That's blowing up. And then Friday, I drop a review for Ghost of Tsushima, and that blows up. Like, what kind of freaking fan base lets me do both of those games back to back and actually clicks both of them? I got some fun stuff coming up. The next, I'm playing something super top secret that I can talk about on July 24th. I'm not even allowed to give a hint what that is, but I will be talking about something on July 24th. And then I guess the next major thing I'm super excited to rip into is definitely the Avengers beta is actually coming up. And I read a lot of comics. I'm a huge comic book person. I actually have a bunch of like rare comic books on my desk at all times. So like this is like a retelling of Spider-Man they did, and this is the Batgirl who can't talk, so she learns to speak through kung fu. Nobody even talks about these weird comics. So
Wow,
that's a real story, by the way. Very good. So
amazing.
yeah, they purposely teach her not to talk to try and change it so that her brain will literally convince itself that violence is language, and so she like just can't. She's nonverbal but beats everybody up. So you'll notice she actually doesn't even have a mouth on her mask. But other than that cheesiness, so I'm going to be talking about the Marvel game for sure. The Marvel beta starts August 7th, and then Tony Hawk's coming up. I don't know. There's always a million projects on my plate, and I love it. I love being too busy.
Oh yeah, I suppose you're not. You're not creatively stifled.
Yeah.
The absolute worst, you could just pick up a Dreamcast game.
Exactly.
No, that's where can people find you? Just on social media in general.
YouTube.com/Dreamcast guy. I appreciate all the new subscribers, all the new people that have been stumbling upon the content, getting close to 200,000 subscribers. When I hit it, I kind of want to maybe live stream getting a Dreamcast tattoo once Corona dies down some, because here in Texas, it is bad with a capital B. But when it chills out some, I do think it'd be interesting to actually like pay a tattoo artist to actually come to my house and ink me up. I think it'd be cool to get like a swirl or something.
Yeah, well, it's a nice simple design. We all know what it means.
Yeah, exactly.
That's absolutely glorious. Is there anything else you want to touch base on, Jesse, before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, I just want to say thanks again for for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. We'd love to have you back at some time. I know me and you have communicated a bit in the past about articles and on article feedback and stuff, and we greatly appreciate anybody using our sources, and it's kind of one of those surreal things because I've watched you for several years now, and to happen to be casually scrolling through YouTube and see somebody that I won't say I know on a personal level, but somebody that I've watched for several years, like just kind of like chilling watching a video and then see, I was reading this article on Biohazard, and I'm like, whoa, what
that hit the group chat. We was like, whoa, what do you mean? What Dreamcast? Whoa. No, we didn't expect that.
Well, then let me go ahead and put something in stone then. Whenever we get if we get a Resident Evil 8 demo, which I feel like we probably will, because we got one for 2, we got one for 3, we got one for 7. So what I'll do is, for sure, when they drop a Resident Evil 8 demo, maybe let's do like a live roundtable topic thing where we come back and do a talking about how we actually think it plays.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay, that sounds fun. Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely count me in for that.
But, any closing words, Max, you want to communicate to the people before we head off?
Stay hyped, stay open-minded, stay healthy, and keep dreaming.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today, Max. It really means a lot.
Yes,
you can find us, guys, on Biohazard Cast, all on where you find your social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good day. Look after yourselves, and we'll be in touch shortly. Thank you very much.
Speak soon, guys.